Then I think we can start. A very warm welcome from my side to our EU Circular Talk on the topic of accelerating circular behaviours. How can digitalisation help us? My name is Imke Schmidt. I'm a project manager at the Collaborating Centre on Sustainable Consumption and Production. And together with my colleague Mariana Nicolaou, who is also a project manager at the CSCP, we will guide you through the session today and also moderate the discussion. Please let me quickly introduce the agenda to you. So we are just in the middle of the welcoming words of today's event. Afterwards, Mariana will set the scene by giving you some introduction into the topic, some more details about our thoughts, why we think that this is a topic of particular interest. And afterwards, we will have exciting insights into cases from different stakeholder groups who use various digital tools to support circular behaviors among consumers. Afterwards, those speakers will join our panel discussion and discuss with us different topics, also the questions that you have sent in advance prior to this meeting. And then we will have some key takeaways and also draw conclusions before we move to continue the talk in the spatial chat. This is a really special feature, something new for us as well. We cordially invite you to join the spatial chat after the event, so meaning from 11:30 to 12:30. So you will have the chance to speak to the speakers directly, to talk to them, address them with your questions, and really have discussions also with other attendees. So please join this after the event. This link that you also see here on the slide will be shared afterwards in the chat of this event. So then you will be directed to this spatial chat. So some practical tips from our side. This webinar will be recorded and the link will be shared with you all in the follow-up. So please notice the recording will start. Also, we would like to ask you to avoid multitasking. So make the most out of your time with us. So if possible, just switch off your emails, web browser and phone. Then also we would like to ask you to send us your questions. So this shall be an interactive event. So you are invited to write your questions in the chat. The chat function is open. So we will address key questions later in the panel with the speakers, but the speakers are also keen to answer your questions in the chat directly. And of course, we will also have the chance to discuss them in the spatial chat afterwards. We have already received some of your questions and we will also try to bring them in during the discussions. Last but not least, please keep your video and the audio off in order to ensure a smooth experience and to avoid any disturbances. So there are many partners behind this event and why this event happens in the first place. So all of this is part of the European Circular Economy Stakeholder Platform, which is an initiative by the European Commission and the European Economic and Social Committee, which is thought to bring together different stakeholders from all over Europe who are working somehow on circular economy and would like to share their experience, also share best practices and also scale those best practices. So we as CSCP are part of the coordination group already for quite a while. And at the moment, we are managing the leadership group on enabling circular behavior through digitalization. You also see a list of those members below. So all of them have supported in the preparation of this event and have contributed with their experience and also their discussions. So many thanks to all of them. It's great that you are here also. So what is the purpose of this talk? What we would like to do is we would like to host a dialogue about how to advance circular behaviors with the support of digitalization. So first of all, this is about scaling circular behaviors. So what are the pieces missing in the puzzle so far in order to make circularity the rule among consumers in Europe and not the niche, which it is at the moment still, unfortunately. Also, we would like to discuss opportunities for you to help. So what can stakeholder groups such as retailers, manufacturers, policymakers, and also NGOs do to support circular behaviors? And finally, in how far can digitalization be an enabler here and play a supporting role in this process? So with this, I would like to hand over to my colleague Mariana, who will give you some more details about the ideas behind it and also about our work that we have done so far on this topic.
Thank you so much, Imke. Hi, everyone. Welcome. Good morning. I'm here sharing my screen so we can continue. As Imke said, my name is Mariana Nicolau. I'm a project manager at the CSCP as well, so a colleague of Imke. And my main focus of work is to address and support sustainable behavior change, so including circular behaviors, both within capacity building programs and trying those behavior change tools on the ground on interventions. So hopefully we can here share the latest insights of our work with you as input for this discussion. Allow me to take a step back before we go into detail on the actual role of digitalization for circular behaviors to clarify some conceptual aspects related to behavior change and bring everybody to the same page. Why are we bothering about circular behaviors in the first place? There is a very important concept within, let's say, behavioral science that recognizes that what we think or what we intend and like to do doesn't necessarily translate into our actual behaviors and action out there. For example, with regards to the circular economy, or particularly with regards to targets related to the circular economy. So on the one hand, as you can see on the side of the intentions, Europeans are very much aware and supportive of protecting the environment. They think it is important, and they see the need of implementing and executing circular behaviors, for example, sorting their waste, recycling their waste as part of that protection rule. But at the same time, when we look into the actual actions and behaviors of people, we see there is a large gap between what people think it is important and what they actually do. Why? Because food, mobility, and housing are still one of the main impact areas of our lifestyles on biodiversity, on climate change, on emissions, on how we use our resources. And this is characterized by, let's say, a limited amount of sharing, of recycling, of reuse still. So we see, as we call, a gap or a difference between what people say they'd like to do and what they really want to do or they actually do in practice. And why is this problematic? Because consumers are a very important piece of this puzzle, and there is inevitably a human element to our policies, to our business models, to our product innovations when it comes to fostering the circular economy. So we should not only include consumers as, let's say, at the end of the line, but rather having it as part of our strategy to making the circular economy possible. That's why we more and more try to bring the topic of circular behaviors, as we call it, to our discussion in this puzzle piece. Yeah? And this is particularly true when we look, for example, into consumer action data within, for example, this electronic sector. But Mariana, why are you looking to the electronic sector? Well, since we're talking today about specifically digitalization and its role to support more circular behaviors, we also thought it is important to have also a critical view on electronics and equipment related to the digitalization sector with regards to the circular economy and how people relate to it. So although people are more and more in favor of repairing and reusing electronic products, and they say that in surveys, we see there is also concrete challenges happening in parallel. Again, I think demonstrating this gap between what people say and what people actually do for various reasons. But some of the main issues would be that electronics or e-waste are one of the fastest growing waste streams in the world, and it increases on a rate of 3 to 4% per year. While at the same time, the lifetime of those products is decreasing, and they tend to last and be used 2 to 3 years less time than they were designed for or that we would expect. So there is still a considerable, let's say, margin for us to increase our recycling rate, just looking to recycling, let alone other types of interventions that we could think about in terms of circular interventions with regards to our electronic products. And looking specifically into repair, there is research from the Commission that says that 1/3 of Europeans haven't repaired a product of theirs in the past. And depending on the survey we look into, there is also information from the Eurobarometer that says, if we say repairing the last 6 months of people's experience, then this number is even more critical where 2/3 of people haven't repaired anything in the past 6 months. And why is it so in the first place? It's increasingly clear to us through insights from behavioral science that people are irrational. I don't know how much of a surprise that sounds to you. I think we tend to see ourselves, we like to see ourselves as rational people, if not all the time, most of the time. But what research has been showing us is it's actually the contrary. What do I mean by that? Daniel Kahneman, which is a Nobel Prize winner, I think from 2002, he came up with this idea of two systems that happen to be placed in our brains, in our minds, and they happen to be there in parallel. Where system one is a fast way of thinking that we have. It's a relatively automatic one. It happens often, so it's frequent, it's emotional, it's subconscious, and it's a lot about intuition. So it's situations where we react quickly based on emotions to everyday life. So maybe when I wake up, I stand up, I go to the bathroom, I brush my teeth, I do my bed, things that I do every day that I might think I decide to do that, but those are aspects that are more automatic than I could imagine. But if I ask you also how much 2 + 2 is, I think 4 immediately comes to your mind, and you might think you produced that thought, but it's actually much more some kind of reflection and intuitive and subconscious automatic thought that immediately comes to your mind that is already, let's say, stored there based on your previous experience and your preferences. So that's system one. And I think this is connected also to how other animals behave, and it's more instinctive and intuitive. Whereas system two is a type of slow thinking. It's something more thoughtful that we deliberately decide to put into place and to use when needed. For example, to solve a more complex problem in our family or at work, or even a math problem, keeping on the same line of thought. And Daniel Kahneman likes to give 17 × 24 as an example of a math problem that you don't automatically solve, but rather have to stop and think about. So it's something that becomes more effortful, and it's very infrequent. So when we think of those two ways of thinking, as I said in the beginning, I think we like to think that we are super rational or rational most of the time, but research has shown quite the contrary, that system one is really the one leading about 85% of our decision making throughout our day in life. So knowing that people are most of the time irrational, and that there is a difference between what we know and we say and what we actually do, what does that mean to us, not to our work? So if we are not going to provide people necessarily information, or if we do, we shouldn't do that only. We should think of what people really need in practice. What are those really needing pieces? And behavioral models have been helping us thinking of additional ways of engaging people with our behavior change strategies, for example, for the circular economy. And although models are many out there and models are different between them, they bring 3 main pillars, or let's say threads that are common to all of them to help us thinking about solutions. And the first question is whether people want to do that one thing you want to engage them with, be it increasing repairing rates, increasing return of their products, for example, electronic products, be it sharing more. What is it that you want to engage, or that we need to engage Europeans with? And first ask ourselves, do people really want to do it? So in other words, we're asking ourselves, are they motivated to take that action? And if not, then what are motivation initiatives we can engage them with? So that's the one pillar. The second one I would highlight is whether people really can do that thing you want them to engage with. So they might be fond of repairing, but they don't know first where to go for it, or they don't know if they should do it themselves, so they should themselves hold their skills, or have help from somebody else. So the question of capability is very important. And thirdly, whether there is an external reason for me to act now, or if this is something that I can push for later and push for later. And going back to the example of the electronics, just putting, for example, smartphones on my drawer and leave it there for that one time that never comes, when I finally go to clean that drawer and might return those smartphones. Or there is a reason for me to do it now because there is an appealing campaign, there is maybe some financial returns or some motivation to support the environment that might seduce me to act now and not later, because there is an opportunity now. So here we bring not an exhaustive list of potential things to look into, but initial, let's say, ideas to spark innovation opportunities in your mind. And particularly you thinking of an actor in a city or as an NGO or a business developing those solutions. How can you jump into one of these three opportunities I just highlighted? You could think, for example, of how you can make that engagement easier for consumers. Do you have any way to take barriers out of people's ways? Do you have any way to make it more engaging coming next, to have it as something fun, something you do as a group of people in society? Can you get closer to people's behavior in a way when they are deciding at the end to recycle or to reuse something? Can you get closer to that decision moment and bring them an alternative? And finally, I think also with the COVID pandemic, we learned how important and effective social pressure is. We definitely would think of, are there social messages, social norms that can help us putting pressure towards a desired behavior? And it doesn't mean most of the people should do something for it to be effective. If we show that more and more people are, for example, producing their own products or repairing themselves or reusing a certain type of product or buying something secondhand, this feeling of a dynamic society that's changing their behaviors tends to be a motivation for people to jump into that boat and behave similarly. So in this process, we are convinced that great ideas for changing behaviors come from a combination of three pillars. First, insight, meaning how can we have a realistic view on the people? So not assuming that knowledge can change everything, but really trying to understand what motivates people in reality. What are they really needing in order to engage with a circular initiative in a certain sector in their city or workplace or at home? And once we know people better, we apply that knowledge into a mapping exercise, looking into different pillars, as I mentioned, and we try to identify what is a useful behavior change tool to help us on that process. And finally, very important, not stay on the ideas playground, but really going into the battlefield and really trying things on the ground in order to learn what works and what doesn't work. And in this process of going from understanding people better through to developing interventions and testing it on the ground, we see two main opportunity spaces for us to think of digitalization as a supporting tool or potentially helpful tool for us to support people, consumers on the process of being more circular. First, we could think about digitalization as a tool in the planning process of our intervention. So I'm here looking more into when I get to know better my audience, when I get to know better how they behave, when I choose the tool to intervene, digital tools could be helpful. And here I'm thinking of databases, I'm thinking of click-through rates on social media, I'm thinking of online digital surveys. There are many ways that digital tools could help us gathering better knowledge and designing our projects for circular behaviors. But it could also mean that digital tools, and then that the second way of seeing it as a potential supporting tool, is that it could be the means for our interventions. Digital tools or digital channels could be the hosting or the way that we put this intervention out there. In other words, the way we interact with people. And for that, we could think of a digital intervention happening on a website, a digital intervention happening in a social media tool, happening through an app. And today with our event, we try to bring examples of concrete cases that illustrate these two potential uses of digitalization to help us on our interventions, but at the same time, through our panel discussion that comes later, and I think Imke will elaborate further on that, hopefully we also have a critical view on that and have a balanced understanding of opportunities and challenges. Before I really hand over to you, Imke, quickly share with you all one concrete example of how we have done a behavior change intervention in the digital space, particularly in the electronic sector. And for that, I bring to you to your attention the Consumer Insight Action Panel, which is a project we closed recently and had the financial support of Citra, which is the Finnish Innovation Fund. And the Consumer Insight Action Panel was about gathering different stakeholder groups around the idea of designing and implementing, testing on the ground, behavior change interventions. And then we had different clubs, and one club was the electronics club. And then there we had different European stakeholders from different countries to decide one behavior to focus on and to design an intervention to see if we could help people behaving more circular with regards to a certain behavior. So concretely, we got ourselves busy with the question, how can we support people increasing their return rates of their old smartphones? And for that, we collaborated with Refurbed, which is a marketplace. In other words, a place where we can have different offers of secondhand electronics, including smartphones. So we were busy with the idea. They were building, let's say, a website or a part of their marketplace really to buy back those phones. And we wanted to know, how can we make that even more effective? So just to bring quickly some insights from research, about 10% worldwide of smartphones are returned by consumers. So really a small share of all smartphones consumed, which brings the urgency of the question of how can we increase the return rate? And then we started with a survey, and we asked many consumers, mainly in Austria, how could we, what would motivate them to return their phones? And there, I think the aspect of financial benefit, so how much I get in terms of money when I return a phone, was important for people. And the idea of dropping that phone somewhere, having a drop-off station, was clearly the preferred option of people. So what we did was we created that same.
One more minute.
Yeah.
Mariana, it's over. So sorry. Yeah, one more minute, okay? And
okay,
then...
thanks. Yeah, so I quickly wrap up. We had the journey of the consumer there, and we decided, in order to help us deciding when to intervene. So we decided to intervene quite early in the process, where people actually get aware of that opportunity. And first we did an A and B test on Refurb's website, where we offered people two different messages: the money one, so how much money people would get, or an ecological one, you can plant trees when you return your phone. And the money option was the one most preferred by people, so that's what that got most of the clicks. There was also an intervention using stories on Instagram through a video to help increasing awareness of that website, so to get people from there to the actual return platform. And then finally, there was also some insights about still platforms like eBay are preferred when people have a good phone, because they think they can get more money for it. Quickly on our conclusions there, it's important that we make it easy for people to engage in aspects like returning their smartphones. So on circular initiatives, money still can be an important argument, for example, in this specific case of our intervention. If people's attention are in the digital space, it's the digital space that we should also look into. So thinking of digital interventions is clearly an opportunity. And platforms specifically like that, like Refurb's one, could be useful for second-hand phones that are maybe older, not super fit, and give people a second chance to still return their phones to the market. Imke, I think I hand over to you with that piece of idea that we have a vision in mind of creating a navigator to help us all better understanding how can we foster circular behaviors, particularly with the support of digitalization, and having an online course built around that. If you're interested in that idea, do let us know, do drop us a line. And I think this conversation today is a starter for that initiative and process, to see how much interest there is out there for that. Thank you.
Mariana, thank you so much. Maybe you just, yeah, okay, so I share the next slide with you. So great insights, many thanks. So please remember that you can use the chat, yeah, to ask questions. Also, Mariana is quite happy to answer them, so please use it. So now I'm really happy to present our speakers of today's event to you. So first will be William Neal, who is Advisor for Circular Economy at DG Environment of the European Commission, and he will present the digital product passport and how it is related to circular behaviors among consumers. Then we have... Sorry? Okay, so maybe I just, I would first introduce quickly the rest of the speakers. There are some noises who are interfering, right? Do you hear them as well? Okay, maybe William, you just go ahead, because I have some interruptions here. So, and then I'll introduce the other speakers later.
Yes, hello, I hope you can hear me now, and there aren't too many other noises, so I'm going to try and share my screen, and if not, I might have to ask you to share the version that I sent to you, as I seem to be having a few problems in sharing. So I wonder if perhaps you could share my presentation, and I'll tell you when to do the clicking. So good morning, everybody. Yeah, so circular economy is about value retention, and what we're trying to do with the circular economy is to maximize the value and the functionality of the materials that are flowing through our economy. So if you think of it as like a river running through the European economy, there are three ways in which we can try to make that circular. That's great. That's the right one. So we're on the second slide. So you can see on the left-hand side here, you can either try to improve the resource efficiency of the materials as they flow in to the economy, and then they're converted into products, buildings, assets, and so on. Or we can try to improve the recycling rate. So that's the loop along the bottom that you can see in this diagram. Not only the quantity, but also the quality of recycling. But it's the bit in the middle which is perhaps the most forgotten and actually one of the most important. So if you give another click, you'll see what I mean. The bit in the middle is the point from which a product goes onto the market up until the point at which it becomes waste. And this is the period, of course, when the product is in the hands of the consumer. Now, unfortunately, the usual infographics for circular economy, you know, the sort of the circle of arrows, production, consumption, and recycling. And even this kind of material flow Sankey diagram don't capture what we really want to do, which is not just to make the circle, but to slow it down. So next slide. If we want to make this sort of river of resources into more of a lake, we have to have products that last longer, that can be repaired, upgraded, refurbished, and so on. We need to, in order to get there, we need to have opportunities to do things like buying access to products. We need to be able to increase the intensity of the use of products. We need to be able to share them. And we need to avoid things like empty space in buildings and cars. So if we can achieve that, then sustainable consumption doesn't necessarily have to be an oxymoron. If we can actually decouple the benefit that we get from the products from the resources that are used to produce them in these ways. And for this, product design is fundamental. It determines about 80% of the full lifetime impact of a product. And that is why we adopted the Eco Design for Sustainable Products regulation at the end of March. Now, in behavioural economics terms, what we're doing is called choice editing. That means we're taking off the market the worst design attributes of products. And this is very effective. It means that small tweaks in product design and inexpensive tweaks at the design stage can have major benefits downstream for consumers, for society, and for the environment. And when we're talking about a market of 450 million consumers, this has a massive effect. But the most groundbreaking element of the Commission's proposal in March wasn't really the expansion of eco-design to cover circularity, but rather it was applying it not only for physical requirements on products, but for data requirements. Next slide. So much of the value and potential of products today is a function of the data that they carry or the data that they actually generate during their lifetime. And circularity, as I said at the beginning, is about retaining value and maximizing utility. One of the most important obstacles to circularity has been lack of consistent access to the relevant information for stakeholders. So today, the vast majority of that data is actually lost. So as the product sort of travels through the economy, that data is lost, even though the technology does exist to link that data to products, and also the technology exists to manage huge amounts of data. The data itself exists, it's just not in the right place and not accessible. So, for example, recyclers don't have access to information on hazardous or valuable substances. Repairers don't have access to information on how to disassemble products or on spares availability. So by obliging access to this information, we are opening up many possibilities for business to business and business to consumer circular actions. And that's why I call the digital product passport data for action rather than data for knowledge. The European Commission doesn't need to know or want to know this information for itself. What we're trying to do is to provide the systems architecture based on global and open standards and a participative process to identify the relevant data for different product groups and to make that available to those people that can use it. So next slide, please. So we're in the process of developing the system architecture in time for the entry into force of the regulation. So it's going through co-decision procedure at the moment. So on the left here, you can see what we're trying to do in terms of establishing the right standards and systems architecture. The data requirements themselves will be defined through subsequent delegated acts, product group by product group. And you can see on the bottom right of the slide here that this could, depending on the product, mean information on recycled content, on substances of concern, on the environmental footprint profile, classes of performance, technical parameters, and so on. So what will this mean for consumers, and how could it influence or help them to a more circular behaviour? So next slide, please. 94% of consumers told us that they want to be more green. This is Eurobarometer figures, as you mentioned before, but they're already bombarded with too much information. And as you said earlier, Mariana, information isn't necessarily the biggest problem. Products and markets are hugely complex and our cognitive capacities are limited. So today we live with major behavioural market failures. Now, for centuries, the only way to really handle this complexity has been the price system. So next slide. And this is where the rational consumer, Homo economicus, makes a choice based on price, utility, and preference. But not only does this not work in terms of just pure self-interest and economic rationality, it undervalues or excludes many of the considerations that we need to make those sustainable choices, which you can see on the slide. So how will making even more data accessible through the digital product passport unbind this rationality to make it possible? How could it actually change consumption habits? Well, we don't really expect an individual buying a product to consult the passport and to process the information for themselves. But what we can expect is an array of services that do that for them. So tailoring the data and delivering it to them in digestible ways in order to provide consumers with more variety in the way they consume. Next slide. So this would mean that they should be able to buy less stuff, to buy potentially better quality stuff, to keep it for longer, to get it repaired and serviced. It should mean that opportunities for moving to accessing products rather than owning them, or to becoming prosumers are enhanced. And it will be for the producers, the retailers and other service providers to really find ways to develop those choices and services, and also to decouple their own profits from sales by using circular business models. So the idea is that the digital product passport makes the right information accessible to the right stakeholders at the right time along the value chain to enable these kinds of circular applications. Finally, a little warning to anybody that believes that technologies provide the answer to our environmental or indeed any other challenges. So next slide, this is my last one. In the age of e-commerce, when behavioural algorithms can predict human preferences and nudge us to buy more, digital technologies can, of course, harm just as much as they can help. They can push us to more extreme linear consumption. So in themselves, the technologies don't provide the solutions. We have to harness them in the right way. And through the eco-design process, the digital product passport should do just that. And of course, in doing so, it will complement other tools. It doesn't exist in a vacuum. As you know, we have the existing EU Eco Label, we have the Green Claims Initiative, and Right to Repair. So I'll leave it there. Happy to answer any questions as we go along.
Thank you so much, William. That was great insights into the digital product passport and then how far it is related to consumer behavior. So I already see there are already things going on in the chat, so please also have a look and maybe there will be questions. So I'm really happy to also have Cynthia Reynolds here, who is the founder of Circular Regions, and she will speak of digitalization as a tool to gather circular behavior case studies. So, Cynthia, the floor is all yours, and looking forward to your presentation.
Thank you very much. I'm just going to share my screen here for a second. There we go. So, circular regions, our goal is to activate ecosystems to be able to bridge top down and bottom up through a suite of practical and effective tools and resources. We originally focused on place-based solutions because that's where you're going to get the critical mass to see real change. Everything is multi-stakeholder to be able to look across sectors with a quintuple helix innovation. Our goal is mission-oriented. Everything we do is to empower individuals and organizations, and we do that through data-driven solutions with dynamic data and scalable systems. I often describe the circular economy as a diamond. It has so many facets, and each of us looks at it through the lens of those facets, whether it's about plastic, food, mobility, construction, social enterprise. And if we have a shared intelligence to understand how we can focus in the same direction, we really can make it shine. What we do is we are collecting data and case studies, and everything connects to the SDGs. What we've clearly seen is that it's about so much more than 12 and 17. We have data identifying solutions that support good health and well-being. But how did we do this? When we wanted to come together and look at how can we find a holistic understanding of the circular economy, we looked at what the research was saying, and there is a very well-documented study from Kirscher & Co. in 2017 that analyzed 114 different definitions of the circular economy. If there were that many then, I can't venture a guess as to how many there are now. But they broke it down into an economic system based on business models that replace the end-of-life concept. But within there, we also have some elements that we need to take into account. We have to look at all of the life cycle phases, and the data here within these 5 categories is matched perfectly on the European Environment Agency's framework for enabling circular business models in Europe. We see that we have to look at the entire life cycle, and as our last presenter said, we have to look at how can we close those loops, and the smaller the loop, the bigger the impact. What we need to do is also gather the data and understand what's happening at the global level, this meta level, to look at global agreements on standards on plastic packs, for example. How can we identify what's happening at the macro level with cities, regions, and nations establishing economic incentives, roadmaps, and strategies? But we also see, and this is what I call the magic level, meso, where clusters and networks such as industrial symbiosis come together for genuine collaboration. But we need to understand the data that's happening at the micro level with companies and organizations, but then right down, just as we're seeing with the digital product passport, at the nano level. What is the information we can learn about users, about the products, components, and materials? And in doing so, one of the elements that was lacking very much in the concept of the circular economy was that everyone's talking about economic prosperity and environmental quality, but very few people are incorporating social equity into their models. What we've done is we've developed a platform that can map any circular strategy, any business model, any economic incentive or policy, as well as any educational or behavioral shift resource. These solutions are compatible with best practice frameworks, And there's a lot of discussions about how can we create case studies. And there are case studies galore, but they're all really static data in PDFs and reports. What we're looking at is what is the best practice for mapping these case studies, and how can we identify what's happening with the economies of scope and scale from a hyper-local level right up to a global level. When it comes down to the business models, we need to be able to look at how we can shift our economy. What are the offerings, the business models between the public sector, the private sector, the third sector, with individuals in the middle? What are the new services that governments can offer to consumers? What are the shifting of business models from the private sector to the third sector with social enterprise? And how are they related to the 5 capitals? Within each of our case studies, we also gather information on the technology readiness level. Anyone who's done a Horizon project understands how that works. But we've also incorporated something that is getting a lot of attention. It is called the societal readiness level. And this stems from the Danish Innovation Fund. The concept where a level 1 is you've identified a problem and you have an idea. And you work your way up through the stages by identifying the stakeholders, establishing pilot projects, gaining feedback, and reiterating as you go. Level 9 is something that is simply integrated into society that we don't think twice about. And in this process, we were hired by the city of Umeå as part of the OECD's Circular Economy in Cities and Regions program, where they identified that the #1 action point for any city or region was to map out who's doing what. And in that process, we realized that our solution could support any sort of project in the circular economy. And I'll play a brief little video for you here.
Significant financial resources such as Horizon Europe, EU Green Deal, and regional funding mechanisms are being utilized to develop projects, initiatives, and reports to understand circular case studies. Without a common vocabulary, this data is often useless beyond the project timespan, often residing in an analog or static digital format such as reports and outdated websites. Digitalisation offers multiple opportunities. Instead of building closed boxes, we can create pieces of the puzzle to connect together. Data needs to not only be compatible with best practice frameworks, such as the EA's framework for enabling circular business models in Europe. It also needs to be interoperable. Investments can be better utilized through research and innovation programs and impact investing, supported by dashboards, benchmarking, and new metrics. A common international understanding is required to help identify and break down cultural barriers. By utilizing a common structured data set or ontology that not only enables human readable, but also in time, machine readable formats, we can better understand and analyze our collective data. A pillar of the circular economy is to optimize the use of our assets. This should also hold true for project funding, enabling better policy development and investments of both public and private resources. The backbone to the Circular Regions platform incorporates the digital infrastructure to support projects. They can be of any scale, from hyperlocal to regional to global. Any time span, from 3-month pre-projects to multi-year research and innovation projects. Any facet of the circular economy, from cross-sectoral to sector-specific such as food systems, textiles, or the built environment. And they can be initiated by any stakeholder, enabling cross-pollination of data and research for a shared intelligence and systems awareness.
And so you may ask, what exactly does a case study look like? And so given the topic for today of consumer awareness and behavioral shift, this is an example that I often show. It happens to be my own local community. It's a smart library of things. These exist around the world. How can we identify the data behind it to understand how we can network, replicate, and scale these? Every case study, now this is an example of an initiative. This can be a policy, as I mentioned, an economic incentive. We can study EPR on this. We can look at what is the status. Is it active? Is it on hold? Was it on hold because of COVID? Was it a pilot project? Where exactly is it located? And we also have geolocation data. Something that we're seeing that's critically important is identifying who's the organization behind it and who are their partners to understand the broader ecosystem. We can also identify the scale, and there's a big move now for the local and regional scales to say, how can we make things stay within our regions? What is the business model, the stakeholders behind it? And if it is a product as a service model, are they using rental, membership, or sharing? And if they are doing so, as well as leasing as another example, what are the product types that are being offered? Which facet of the circular economy is associated with this? In this case, it's community, product as a service, repair, sharing, and social enterprise. And the data that's being gathered is at the micro level, the societal readiness level. And we also look at what's the future potential. Is it scalable, replicable, and networkable? Where on the life cycle phase does this sit? Some case studies will sit across all the different life cycles. Others will focus on one or two areas. This one, for example, looks at consumption and stock. And when it looks at consumer behavior, we're looking at a mind shift from owning to sharing. And we also look at waste prevention and waste prevention campaigns within this. We gather data on the timeline, and all of those are data points. This is our only section for free text. Everything else can be critically analyzed. But we also provide information for a local language. We see that there's an absolute need for breaking down those linguistic barriers. We gather information on the impacts, environmentally, economically, and socially. And one of the reasons why I show this one is because the list of social impacts is so long. When we start seeing solutions that can do increased emergency preparedness, this is something that we need to look at when we're looking at severe climate impact coming in and having to rebuild communities. We look at the barriers and the enablers. These break down into 5 categories: social, technological, regulatory, cultural, and market. We look at the secondary materials being input and the circular materials being output. We look at the key product value chains, the 7 within the European Green Deal. What is the technology behind it? What is supporting that? Is it AI, blockchain, distributed ledger tech, network, robotics, sensors? What is the technology readiness level? What is the licensing behind that? Is it open source or proprietary? But as mentioned regarding the digital product passport, it's about the data and the data sharing. How can we look at what data is being collected? How smart is it from an analytics standpoint? Is it to simply collect where you describe what happens, diagnose why it happens? Can we get smarter and discover what could happen? And if we get up to the level where we can actually analyze the data, we look at how can we predict what will happen, and ideally, how can we start to prescribe how to make it happen? And that will be critical for policies and economic incentives. We look at the unit of measurement. We can measure any kind of data collection, whether you're looking at motivations, consumption, utilization, it doesn't matter. And we look at who are you sharing it with? Are you sharing it across the value network? Are you sharing it with users, with the public sector, with the knowledge sector, up or down the stream? And all of these case studies are able to be looked at in any way you would like. Every single one of these data points allows us to look at it like a magic Rubik's Cube. An example would be to say, show me all of the case studies that are, an example here, looking at educational behavioral change with a subset of a mind shift from owning to sharing. How can we start looking at how we can connect it all together? Each of these case studies can be put together in separate projects. We can put them together from regional dashboards. And I'm proud to say that, I'm just going to do a stop share here, that we're going to be launching towards the next, in the next quarter, the Circular Economy Coalition. We have partners internationally looking at how can we use this as a shared intelligence, partners in the Global South and the Global North. And this is something that's very exciting. And if anyone's interested in connecting to learn more about how they can be part of that coalition, I'm welcome to join me and talk in spatial chat. Thank you.
Great, Cynthia. Thank you so much for this excellent insights into your work and also of how to use digitalization in a special way to support circular behaviors, rather like behind the scene, right? So yeah, there will be also questions for you, I guess, in the chat. So please have a look. Also for William, there are many great questions in the chat already. So if you just click on the chat button on the top of your screen, then you will have the chance to enter it and maybe also have the chance to answer some of them. So yeah, I'm honored to introduce the next speaker to you, who is Markus Terrejo. He is a project manager at the Finnish Innovation Fund Sitra, and he will present the PS Lifestyle app, which is a result of a project that he's managing at the moment. So please, Markus, go ahead.
Thank you. Hopefully you can see the slides. Good morning, everyone. My name is Markus, and I will discuss an approach how to guide and help normal people to build good life for themselves, which would also be sustainable. And that's something that we are trying to do in a quite new EU project called PS Lifestyle. PS stands for Positive and Sustainable Lifestyles. The approach is based on some work that the Finnish Innovation Fund Sitra has done in Finland in the past 5 years. And I'll talk about the basic philosophy behind the project, and then discuss that how we are building impact across 8 different countries through this Horizon 2020 project called PS Lifestyle. First, a few challenges. Why are sustainable behaviors or choices not mainstream even today? Majority of people, when you say the word environmental, green, sustainable, circular, they close their ears and eyes. They think that what you're about to offer is something worse than what they have at the moment. And this is something that we definitely need to take into consideration if we want to guide people towards new habits in terms of what they eat, how they live, how they move about, and what type of products and services they buy. So if we don't make sure that people get information in a format that fits the core drivers of their behaviors, then we will definitely fail. Second challenge is that majority of Europeans don't know where their environmental impact comes from. We have in the past and continue in the PS Lifestyle project to focus on climate impact of people's everyday choices. But most people don't know what the impact is and where does it come from. So then it's of course hard to think that what could I do differently? But also things that most people realize that I could do differently, they don't know how big of an impact would it really matter if I change from, let's say, eating 3 times a week red meat based meals to pork or chicken or even plant-based protein. Does it really matter? So we need to make that clear to people as well. So what's the combined impact of millions of people making small choices and different behaviors going forward as a group? Make that visible. And then the fourth challenge is that climate change can be daunting, and the required emission reductions by 2050, just the gap between current emissions and the target seems so huge that most people think that it's impossible. And I agree, it may feel daunting that cutting 90% of consumption-based emissions, as we should do by 2050, that may sound impossible. But if we put it in terms of 3 decades, so by 2030, if we are able to cut consumption-based carbon emissions by every individual in Europe by 50%, we are on our way towards meeting the Paris Agreement targets. And then we cut again by 2040, another 50% away. And then by 2050, another 50%. And particularly the first cut of 50% can be done quite fast by changes made by regular people. Then the next cut of 50%, we need to unlock certain things that the current system of kind of our societies that are locking us into, like how we are producing energy, how our transportation system works, and so forth. So we need to make these systemic changes at the same time, and that will unlock certain things for people to then choose differently going forward. So those are the key challenges. So how to make this of interest to the largest possible population so that we can really have meaningful impact. So there's hidden potential if we can activate and get people involved. How to do this? In Finland, we've built a very simple model. We've done studies on what drives the behavior of everyday Finnish person with regarding of their housing, eating, mobility, and buying of products and services. And surprise, surprise, it's not price or money, but actually the four main things that drive on average everyone in Finland is the value of family. So something that shows that you want to kind of take care of your family. Then independence of the individual. So I'm in control. Finns are very big on that. And then we hunt for little everyday joys. And then we are ready to make some small actions for the environment, like recycling, of picking up rubbish on the street and putting it into the bin and things like that. So if we can understand what drives the behaviors, then we can connect positive suggestions of what to change in their everyday habits to these things, and then we can create kind of content that resonates with everyone in the population. We've divided Finns into 7 different groups, and you can see that above the middle line are groups where sustainability actually is a strong motivator for any behavior that these people have. And then below the line are groups where sustainability is a byproduct of their choices. And then from left to right, you can see that how sustainable this particular lifestyle is. And these are things that we are utilizing in the EU project so that we can pinpoint messaging to certain groups and understand what are the key motivators that drive their decisions, and then position a number or rich enough menu of actions that they can choose from that are unique, the combination for this particular individual that we engage with. They can build a unique plan of what they would like to change, and then see how big of an impact it would have in terms of driving down their consumption-based carbon footprint. We do this by offering a menu of roughly 100 smart choices, and they always describe that what do you as an individual get if you change your behavior according to this suggestion. And these are now being tailored and co-created by citizens across 8 countries. In Germany, Italy, Portugal, Greece, Turkey, Estonia, Slovenia, and Finland, we are creating a localized menu of smart actions. But no one has the time to go through them and read the cards one by one and then pick them. So we are developing a digital tool that allows people to pick tailored actions that are workable at the moment in their current situation in life. If you want, you can click this link. The presentation will be available for everyone. This is the tool that we currently have in Finland. We will make a renewed version that allows for much better analytics of what people are planning to change, what they're currently doing, and what type of actions they feel that they are incapable or unable to do. And just a few numbers from the kind of work that we've done in Finland. We have a population of 5.5 million people. More than 1.4 million times someone has stopped and used our tool for 5 to 15 minutes and created a plan for themselves. And from these plans, we can see differences between city dwellers, people living in the countryside, but more importantly, first year engagement, the average reduction that people can achieve is 33% lower carbon emissions from their lifestyle. And 80% of Finns feel that actually pursuing this sustainable lifestyle, it helps them to cope with the negative feelings that climate change evokes in them. So it's kind of a positive cycle that you're part of a solution, you're part of trying to combat climate, and that makes you feel better about climate change. So we lower the anxiety of people. We are trying to scale the impact. You can see the targets here. So by March 2025, we should have had interactions with at least 4 million European citizens, and then 10% of that group would have then made their own plan. And from these plans, we can show to EU, national, and municipal policymakers that what are things that people are already able to change, what they are planning to change, and what are things that they have challenges with. And then policymakers can see that where can they position carrots and sticks so that they can support a wider range of choices than just buying the electric car or energy efficiency renovation of your home, which are typically things that are at the moment supported financially in many European countries. But there are many, many other everyday choices that create similar or larger reduction of personal carbon footprint, and they should be somehow also be made visible, and policymakers can act on them. Also, companies should have better visibility of where the demand for sustainable products and services actually is at the moment and where is it going forward. So how many people are planning to change their certain dietary habits? How many people are thinking about renovating their home to be more energy efficient, buying a new car that would have lower emissions, and so forth and so forth. So how do we make this visible to companies who can then make or lower the threshold to the new habit with a better new product or an existing product that people are unaware of? So we are trying to connect the grassroots level changes that people are making with the kind of societal changes that are needed, so that the systems that we have in our societies, they need to change as well. And then we can combine the climate efforts from both sides. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Markus, for these great insights. And yeah, I'm sure there will also be questions for you in the chat, so please have a look. So finally, I'm delighted to also present to you Tiina Virilainen, who is a member of the European Economic and Social Committee and head of the policy team of the Consumers Union of Finland. So yeah, she will give us some insights on the ECSP platform. And yeah, please, Tiina, go ahead with your presentation.
Thank you, Imke, and good morning on my behalf as well. It's truly a pleasure to be here as the member of the EESC, and as was mentioned by Imke, I'm also working for the Finnish Consumers Union, so that is also a part of my point of view, the consumer point of view to this very interesting topic. Firstly, I would like to thank the co-organizers and of course the previous speakers for their contributions and inputs. I think it's really extraordinary situation and possibility for us all to hear about the good practices and case studies from different countries and also the policy insights. And if I start with the European Circular Economy Stakeholder platform, it's actually just what the platform does, linking policy with practice. Recognizing the need to bring stakeholders from the field in one place, the European Commission, together with the committee, launched 5 years ago the European Circular Economy Stakeholder Platform. Very difficult name, by the way, for at least for a Finnish person to pronounce. I think I will just use platform from now on. The purpose is to bring together the communities working with circular economy issues from across the Europe, and to promote the circular transition that we all know that we need to do in our societies. So it's kind of a one-stop shop for circular economy community. It is a place for dialogue, for debates, for interaction, and a bridge between existing circular economy initiatives. In fact, all the content on the website comes from you, from different kind of stakeholders, and the debate is continuously being nourished through the communication channels that the platform has. So please have a look at the Twitter, LinkedIn, and a newsletter of the Stakeholder platform. And also this kind of EUCircularTalks are an ideal forum for us to come together and exchange our ideas and practices in specific fields. I especially liked, of course, the Finnish example from Sitra on the PS Lifestyle project is a very good example of how a project can actually be scaled up to being used in different European countries, and I really am looking forward to the results on that, how it goes in different countries, because I know that in Finland it's been really successful, and it is something that we are really, all of the consumers and everyone in Finland is familiar with that, and really it gives useful insights for every consumer on the little steps that we can make. But then a few words about the committee that I'm a member of. It acts as a driver for sustainability. We are identifying gaps and barriers from the civil society's perspective, and that is done through our opinions. The committee is a consultative body to the EU institutions, and we have these thematic exchanges with civil society on topics which include also circular economy. And we draw input from different kind of angles, different kind of point of views from employers, workers, and the civil society organizations. And we have had many opinions related to circular economy. One of the latest was on sustainable product initiative, including eco-design. It was about setting the stage for a wide-scale introduction of the digital product passport that we already heard about. And I think that the new provisions are to extend the life of products and improve product information through, for example, the DPP. And it is really emphasizing the importance of correct and relevant information. And I must say that from the consumer's point of view, we really cannot leave it up to the consumer's sole responsibility of making the choices. We need to engage the whole value chain, starting from the design phase. As we heard already, 80% of the environmental impact actually come from the design phase. And that is one way of making the change and making it easier for consumers to make more circular choices in their lives. So really, we need to have the whole chain involved, and instead of just putting the pressure on the consumers, have everyone on board. Because as we know from studies done by Commission and other parties, consumers are generally quite willing to engage in circular and more sustainable practices. But when it comes to the actual actions and living up to those sort of ideas, the engagement is rather low. And one of the main reasons, of course, is the lack of information, and the DPP is one of tools to enhance that information and give right information for consumers. But also the digitalisation and the different kind of tools can actually provide has a large potential to close the gap between the ideals and the thoughts of consumers and the actual behavior. So I really think this is an important issue to discuss. Digital innovations and infrastructure are an opportunity to drive circular economy and to making information about durability, repairability, and upgradability more accessible and transparent to consumers. So we need that. But when it comes to the DPP, I must say that it is a useful tool, but we are a bit afraid, and that was also mentioned in the committee's opinion, that the need for information is not just about the amount of information, it's also about the quality and the sort of the importance of the information and the manner how the information is given to the consumers. So additional to the DPP, we are recommending also to have repairability scores visible on the packaging on the product, so it would be easy for the consumers to see and not to be forced to use different kind of tools and apps or phones and clicking to reach the information. So there are like barriers also to the digitalization that we need to take into consideration. Then to conclude and not to take too much time, I see that we are running a bit behind. I have one sort of best practice from the platform. This comes actually from Italy. To be fair, not everything from Finland. This is from Italy. It was firstly a startup called Atelier Riforma, and this is about the textile industry and collecting, upcycling, and refurbishing used clothes. We all know that textile industry is really resource intensive, and everything with the fast fashion has huge environmental impacts. The thing that I want to highlight here is that this startup also has a very strong social dimension to it, taking all kinds of actors into the working of this and helping also disadvantaged people to find jobs through this. But now they are investing in developing an artificial intelligence-based technology that actually automates the cataloging, sorting, and digitalization of textile waste. And at least from my experience here in Finland, this is also an issue that we have used textiles being collected, but then they don't find their way into the proper sort of, do they go to reuse or being refurbished, or what is going to happen to them next? So this is a tool that can possibly help with that, so that the clothes will find their way into the next phase in the loop. So this is a very good example of a digital tool that can actually help consumers, the end users, to go more circular. Please, I encourage you all to have a look on the platform and those different best practices there to find more examples. I think this is a very useful tool for us, everyone, and I look forward to continuing the discussions afterward in the panel and in the spatial chat. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Tina, for this great also insight into the work of the platform, but also this nice overview of what we have been discussing so far, and like embedding it also in the critical view somehow. So we would like to discuss now with the panelists. So please, speakers, put your cameras and your microphones on, Mariana as well, and I would just like to start right away. Okay.
Imke, I think also your camera is not on. Not sure, but I can see your camera so far.
Okay. Now? Okay, good. So please go ahead, Mariana. I think you would like to start, right?
Yes. So we are going to try to see if we can manage to at least bring one question to each of you. And if you feel the question connects to you, you're drawn to that one, please, and you're not the one being asked, feel free to just step in. Cynthia, we would like to start with you. So thinking of the platform of the cases that you presented, which is great input for us all, going back to and checking what has been done with regards to the circular economy, and knowing probably whatever intervention we want to think about, somebody else already did in the past. So first, we should look for existing evidence out there, and I think that's great value of both the circular economy platform that Tina just presented, that we're all part of, but also of circular regions. And the question to you is, Cynthia, what do you think you achieved through the platform that you presented, which is based on digitalization, that you wouldn't have achieved otherwise if it wasn't? What is the one thing that you think digitalization brought to you in terms of disseminating that information through the platform?
Thank you. Digitalization of case studies using dynamic data supports the cross-pollination of projects, which in a nutshell means that any case study can provide data for other projects and be utilized in a multitude of ways. It can also be expanded upon. They can grow, and this enables the creation and the enhancement of a new commons. And the commons is a big part of the conversation that needs to be highlighted. To give an example within the context of consumer behavior, I can point to the Norwegian municipally funded project that I showed earlier that utilized the platform for mapping local case studies for the optimization of asset utilization, looking at place-based innovation. It not only identified a multitude of business models and strategies at a local level for product as a service models, the various products and product categories able to be offered, but also the technology required to facilitate those offerings. It included additional data on motivations and the associated barriers on collaborative consumption. And as with any study, one must first collect data, but data can be utilized like a magic Rubik's Cube, as I always say, if it's done properly. It can be analyzed, it can be aggregated and explored to identify trends, as well as be utilized to develop infographics that can communicate a major narrative in a very precise manner, providing essential takeaways to policymakers, for example. And I'll gladly share more information during the spatial chat later on.
Thanks, Cynthia, for highlighting then the aspect as I got from scalability through digitalization, collaboration, and I think intelligence. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. So I would like to ask you one question that was asked in the chat, and we think it's quite important, so we have taken it up here. So there are DPP requirements in the proposed eco-design regulations, which not seem to require mandatory information on attributes that would be helpful to consumers directly in making environmental choices. So will there be any mandatory requirements, so in which attributes are included in the DPP, or will that be voluntary?
Thanks, Imke. Well, I tried to answer it a little bit in the chat. The digital product passport requirements are mandatory. So there are several voluntary and private initiatives that are up and running well, more or less. Global Batteries Alliance, the E.ON, which is in the textile sector, and several others, which show that the technology works and that there is there's already an interest for stakeholders along value chains to cooperate to sort of capture value. There's a business case for it, but that doesn't necessarily mean that all of the types of data will be shared with all of the stakeholders in the public interest and in the environmental interest. So what we're doing in a regulatory way, the reason that there's a logic behind us as a public institution managing a market to bring in obligations is to make sure that other information that wouldn't otherwise be made available is made available. So it is mandatory, and the what data requirements will be for each product group will be discussed with public consultation, stakeholder consultations on, and developed over the period of or during the process of the eco-design process. So it takes a couple of years. It's already been ongoing in the past, just with energy using products and about energy performance, we're expanding that. But of course, if it's a bottle of shampoo or a smartphone, it's going to be very different requirements. But those requirements will be mandatory, and we will be looking at what data is important for consumers, what is important for other stakeholders, recyclers, remanufacturers, repairers, along the chain.
Okay, thank you. So great to know that the consumer perspective will also be important in these discussions. Very good. Great.
Marcos, now I'm looking to you. And thank you again for the chance to have an update and a fresh view on the results of PS Lifestyles. You started by presenting some of the challenges that are inherent to sustainability narratives and engaging people with more sustainable behaviors. Concretely then, on the aspect of using an app for it, is there any, let's say, one very hot challenge that you realized in terms of bringing digitalization into this engagement? As you presented, there are many countries involved, so maybe something that is different from country to country, but thinking more now on a potential challenge that you see that you need to address as part of the project.
Well, definitely the main challenge is that how do we create all the content in terms of the positive suggestions in a way that they resonate locally, they feel culturally relevant, they feel Turkish, they feel Portuguese, they feel German, they feel Estonian, they feel Finnish. So they have to be tailored somewhat. But the background engine for showing the kind of what does this bring to you as the individual, what's the value you get, that may be better well-being, better health, saving of time, saving of money. And we need to understand that what are the priorities between each of the countries, and then promote that particular benefit for the user while showing that the society gets the lower CO2 emission. For 5 to 20% of people, the lower CO2 alone is reason enough to change behavior. But more than 80% of us, we need some other benefit that needs to be made clear. So what do I get from this? So that needs to be made clear. That's our main challenge. And digitalization helps, so we can tailor information as we understand. While the people engage with the tool, we try to understand what's the main motivational driver for them, and then change the content according to that.
Cool, thank you.
Mm-hmm. So Tina, now looking at you, something that is often criticized when we talk about digital solutions, especially, not even talking about all other sustainable initiatives. So what is often criticized is that not everyone is included in this process, because it's not everybody who uses, for example, social media, not everybody has access, etc. So how do you see this, and how can we make sure that everybody has this access and has the chance to use it?
Thank you, Inke. That is a difficult question, and it's so true. It's so true. We all know that there is actually quite a big portion, or a large number of people who cannot use, or don't have the abilities, the capabilities, or the tools, or even the will to use digital tools. And I think that we need to take this into consideration, because it sort of can give the people a sense that they are being left out, and they are not wanted, and it sort of hinders the motivation to do anything. And sometimes we must also remember that those people who really don't have all the high-tech tools, perhaps, and everything, might actually be living a more sustainable lifestyle already than the ones that have all the tools and digital equipment and so forth. So I think that this is something that we need to bear in mind. From the committee point of view, we are emphasizing a lot on the education. And also, I think that from the consumer's perspective, that's important, that we have education starting with kids from school, from kindergartens, and so forth, to educate them how to use the tools, and how to be engaged, and how to get all the benefits from using these digital tools. not forgetting the elderly people. And I think there the third sector has a role to play, because at least in my country, the elderly people are sometimes a little bit left behind in this, and they don't have education offered, or so here's the role for the third sector operators, such as our organization, to educate elderly people. And one thing that I want to also mention is that I think that it's very important that people with different backgrounds from all these sort of sectors, from consumers, different perspectives, are taken into consideration when these tools are being developed. For example, standardization processes are really important, that there would be like inclusion in that as well, so that different kind of, so we would get it incorporated into these tools and systems, and also to acknowledge the challenges that people might have also in the beginning when we are designing these tools to be used. So I don't have a silver bullet for it, sorry.
No, but thank you for putting it also, so like organizing everything, and also remembering us of the elderly people, which is, I think, a really important perspective as well, since we are getting older and older. So maybe instead of our key takeaways, I would like to ask all the panelists now to just maybe sum up a bit and just give us like your vision for digitally supported circular consumer behavior. So where should we head to? Maybe only in 30 seconds, because we are really running out of time. Just give us some of your final thoughts on this. So what would you like to see in the near future?
I can jump in here quickly and just say that I think we need to support solutions that are, if we look at digitalization as a tool, not as the answer, and ensure that we're working with open source solutions that build upon the commons versus these closed proprietary solutions. That's it in a nutshell. Thanks.
Thank you. Who would like to go next? Tina, maybe you?
Yeah, Cynthia put it really well. Yeah, I think that my vision would be that we have easy, accessible and affordable digital solutions for everybody to do more circular choices in their lives.
Thank you. William?
Well, I would agree with both of those remarks from Tina and Cynthia. I think that it's important that we work not just on the assumption that more information will help, but it has to be convenience. And there's also quite a lot of emotional things involved in here. We're talking about behaviour, so we have to consider how we can deliver information in ways which will actually change things. I noticed there's a student that I've been supervising for his master's thesis who's in the room with us today, who wrote a piece about the digital product passport and behaviour, and talked about the endowment effect. So this is I don't know if you've come across this in behavioural science, but it's an emotional thing. It's about your attachment to a product, and if you are attached to it, you're more likely to get it repaired, and you're less likely to take it back. So there are lots of emotional things which also come into play. So I think we have to, we bureaucrats aren't so emotional, and we can't really interfere in people's emotions, but we have to take that into account.
Thank you so much. Markus, last one.
Oh, I agree with my fellow panelists that what they've said, but I would add maybe, or continue what William was saying, that we need to make this kind of path towards the future exciting and something that is inviting to everyone, and that the end goal, the vision where we are headed, is something else that the current vision that is in the back of our minds, which comes from the 50s by the marketing industry in the US, where bigger car, bigger house, nuclear family, dog, and bigger, more. That's the thing that drives us. We need to figure out that how do we create something that is still something that people desire towards, but would be with much less environmental impact.
Yes, I think these are really nice final words. Thank you so much. And so to all of you, all the attendees, all the supporting organizers, and especially also to our speakers, thank you so much for being here with us and giving us these great insights. So this is not ending, you know, there is still the spatial chat, and I welcome everybody to join. Now I